Darnell Washington stood in the middle of the courtroom, the mop still in his hand, as the entire room fell silent. "I will protect her," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. His calloused fingers tightened around the mop handle as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. At the defendant's table, Victoria Ashford, the billionaire whose own lawyer had just abandoned her, lifted her head and looked at him with utter disbelief. None of them knew that this simple moment would mark the beginning of the unraveling of one of the darkest conspiracies in American corporate history. Before we dive into this moving story of justice, courage, and rebirth, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe that anyone, whether a proud billionaire or a quiet janitor, deserves to be treated fairly under the law, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories about silent heroes like Darnell deserve to be told, and you won't want to miss them. Now, let's see what drove a forgotten legal genius to rise up against the very system that once crushed his life. But before everything began to shift, what do you think made Darnell, someone who had lost nearly everything, step out of the shadows at that exact moment? The autumn sunlight of New York filtered through the tall windows of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, casting streaks of light across the marble floor that Darnell Washington had just finished cleaning. 5 in the morning, just like every day for the past 15 years, he was already here. A 45-year-old black man with short-cropped hair beginning to show streaks of gray and deep brown eyes that held both warmth and weariness, dressed in a Navy maintenance uniform with the word maintenance embroidered on the chest pocket. His dark brown skin glistened slightly from the early morning labor. The tiny apartment in Jamaica, Queens was still pitch black when he left at 4:00 a.m. The room had only a single bed, a small stove, and a bare wall adorned with just one photo, the wedding picture of him and Michelle from 17 years ago, before cancer took away the woman he loved. Beside it was a picture of their daughter Jasmine, now 20 and in her final year of college, though in the frame she was only 5, smiling brightly in her mother's arms. Darnell didn't turn on the lights when he left home. Winter electricity bills were high, and with a salary of $2,800 a month, every penny mattered. Breakfast was just black coffee, toast, and food he packed from the courthouse's basement cafeteria, a small privilege for maintenance staff. That morning, as he pushed his cleaning cart down the third-floor hallway, Darnell paused in front of courtroom 302, what he considered the place of the biggest cases. And today, one of the most significant legal battles in New York history was set to begin. The lawsuit against Victoria Ashford, the tech billionaire worth $14 billion. He didn't hear about the case from the news. He didn't own a TV. But from the nights he spent cleaning that very courtroom, he had seen the polished lawyers, heard the things they said when they believed no one was listening to them. The janitor was just furniture, invisible, not worth noticing. But Darnell hadn't always been invisible. 15 years ago, he had been one of the rising stars at Crawford & Associates, a prestigious law firm in Manhattan, one of the few black attorneys to make partner track. He had a corner office overlooking Central Park, the reputation of never losing a major case, and a brilliant future, until everything collapsed. He pushed the memories away. That was the past. Now he mopped floors, polished benches, emptied trash. An honest job that paid the rent and allowed him to occasionally send a bit of money to Jasmine, even though she always refused to take it. As Darnell was about to leave the courtroom, his phone buzzed. A message from the supervisor. "Washington, room 302 needs to be cleaned again. VIP today." Darnell exhaled. VIP meant pressure, inspections, and countless opportunities to get yelled at for the smallest mistake. But as always, he didn't complain. By 9 a.m., the courtroom was packed. Reporters squeezed in, lawyers straightened their ties, keyboards clicked furiously. At the defense table, Victoria Ashford sat alone. She was 38, but looked as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her once sharp blue eyes were now clouded with exhaustion. Her Armani suit was flawless, yet her slightly hunched shoulders and tightly clasped hands betrayed the tension consuming her. Next to her were 6 empty chairs, the seats reserved for her legal team from Mercer Thornton and Associates, the most expensive firm in New York, charging $6,000 an hour. But they didn't show up. Darnell checked the clock. 9:15. The trial would begin in 15 minutes. Victoria kept calling, and each time she put the phone down, her face grew paler. And Darnell knew. They weren't coming. They had abandoned her. "All rise," the court officer announced. Judge Patricia Hayes entered, stern, cold, experienced. She paused when her eyes landed on the empty chairs and asked, "Miss Ashford, where is your legal team?" Victoria stood, trying to stay composed, but her voice trembled. "I don't know, Your Honor. They were here yesterday. I've tried contacting them all morning, but no one answered." Prosecutor Rebecca Sterling rose, a thin, triumphant smile on her face. "Your Honor, it is clear the defense has been abandoned. We move for a default judgment." The courtroom erupted with murmurs. Reporters typed frantically. Judge Hayes sighed. "If you have no legal representation, the court cannot delay indefinitely. I am forced to... I will protect her." The warm, deep voice cracked through the room like thunder. Everyone turned. Darnell Washington stood there next to his cleaning cart, the mop still in his hand. The lights reflected off his dark skin and graying hair, and his face, lined by 15 years of endurance, was now illuminated with determination. Chuckles broke out, first soft, then louder, but he didn't flinch. Darnell set the mop down and walked up the aisle. 2 decades of mopping floors couldn't erase the posture of a lawyer who had once won major cases in this very room. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Who are you?" "My name is Darnell Washington, Your Honor. I would like to represent Miss Ashford." Rebecca Sterling let out a mocking laugh. "A janitor wants to be a lawyer?" Her eyes swept over his uniform, his dark skin, the dismissal in her gaze unmistakable. Darnell met her gaze, unflinching. He had faced that look 1,000 times before. "I was a member of the New York Bar Association for 18 years. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Darnell pulled out his worn wallet and produced his old license, still valid. The judge examined it, her face paling slightly. "Mr. Washington, how long has it been since you practiced?" 15 years, Your Honor." The air grew heavier. The judge continued, "And you believe you are still competent?" "Your Honor, this woman deserves to be defended. I know the law, I know procedure, and I understand what justice means." Victoria stood. She looked into his eyes, not seeing desperation nor ambition, but sincerity, the kind that a $6,000 an hour legal team could never offer. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "I accept Mr. Washington." The courtroom erupted. Judge Hayes rubbed her temples. "You have 15 minutes to confer with your client, and do not delay the proceedings." Darnell approached the defense table, only to be blocked by security. "Sorry, only attorneys allowed in this area." Darnell held out his card. The judge nodded to confirm. The guard stepped aside awkwardly. When he sat down, Darnell felt every pair of eyes fixed on them, but he looked only at Victoria. "Something is very wrong here," he whispered. "This isn't just about your lawyers abandoning you. Everything is orchestrated." Victoria whispered back, "How do you know?" "Because I've seen thousands of cases over the last 15 years. This one isn't natural." "So who?" "We'll find out. But first, I need to hear everything." Victoria looked at him, the man she had passed by every day without noticing, the man who stood up for her when no one else did. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found the right person. 15 minutes passed like 15 seconds. Victoria spoke almost without pausing, trying to compress 3 months of legal preparation into an emergency briefing. She explained her technology, a quantum processor that operated at room temperature, a breakthrough capable of changing everything from computing and data to energy production. She told him about Apex Technologies, the company accusing her of stealing their technology. And she told him about the 3 months of hell since the allegations surfaced. Stock prices plummeting, the press circling, partners turning their backs. Darnell listened without taking notes. He didn't just hear every word. He absorbed the pauses, the moments when her voice hitched. His deep brown eyes never left Victoria's face. She realized he was doing more than listening to the content. He was reading her, the tension in her voice, the hesitation when mentioning certain details, and the absolute certainty when she spoke about the technology she had created. "Time's up," the clerk announced. Judge Hayes struck the gavel. "Mr. Washington, prepare for your opening statement." Darnell rose and walked to the podium. He felt the full weight of every gaze in the room, some skeptical, some curious, some outright condescending. How many years had it been since he last stood here? How many nights had he lain awake in his small Queens apartment, dreaming of a moment like this, only to wake up again with a mop in his hand? He placed his hand on the podium, feeling the smooth wood beneath his palm. Drawing a deep breath, Darnell lifted his head and looked directly at the 12 faces in the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice calm and clear, "my name is Darnell Washington. First, I apologize for my appearance. I'm not wearing an expensive suit like my colleague across the aisle. I don't have a fancy office or a team of assistants. Less than an hour ago, I was still mopping the floor of this courtroom." Soft laughter rippled from the back. Darnell heard it clearly, but did not falter. "But for 15 years, I have stood in this room every day, watching justice unfold. I have seen truth triumph, and I have seen truth buried. I have learned that justice does not depend on the price of your suit or the name of the law firm you hire. It rests on something much simpler, the truth." He paused, letting the words settle. "And the truth in this case is simple. Victoria Ashford stole nothing. She created a revolutionary technology through her own intellect, toil, and talent. Meanwhile, those who truly wish to seize that technology are using the legal system as a weapon." Rebecca Sterling shot to her feet. "Objection! He's arguing, not delivering an opening statement." "Sustained," Judge Hayes said. "Mr. Washington, keep your remarks to the facts." Darnell nodded. "My apologies, Your Honor. I will let the evidence speak for itself. And I promise you only this. By the end of this trial, it will be unmistakably clear who is telling the truth and who is lying." He sat down. It wasn't a polished opening, nor was it adorned with dazzling rhetoric, but it was sincere. And from the quiet nods of a few jury members, Darnell knew at least someone was truly listening. Rebecca Sterling stood for her opening statement, tall, slender, with a smile sharp as glass. She walked to the podium as if it were her personal stage. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice smooth as silk. "This case is not nearly as complicated as the defense wants you to believe. It is extremely simple. Theft." She walked slowly, her gaze sweeping across the faces before her. "Victoria Ashford stole proprietary inventions belonging to Apex Technologies, a company that invested hundreds of millions of dollars developing quantum processing technology. She used her connections in the industry to access internal research, copied the designs, and filed for patents under her own name." Sterling paused, letting the accusation hang heavily in the air. "We will prove this with documents, expert testimony, and the accounts of her own former employees. By the end of this trial, there will be no doubt Victoria Ashford is a thief, and thieves must be held accountable." She sat down with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. The rest of the morning passed like a blurred nightmare. The prosecution called its first witness, a tech analyst who claimed Victoria's design was too similar to Apex's internal records to be a coincidence. When it came time for cross-examination, Darnell stood, feeling every muscle in his body tense. 15 years since he last did this. 15 years since he last stood before a witness, peeling back details one by one, searching for the smallest inconsistencies to unravel the bigger picture. But when he opened his mouth, something strange happened. The words returned naturally. Questions flowed into one another as if he had never left the profession. He guided the witness through overlapping details, mismatched timelines, technical logs the witness claimed to have seen but wasn't reasonably able to access. And as the contradictions began to emerge, Darnell felt something awaken inside him, something he had buried for 15 years, the man he used to be, a lawyer. By the end of the day's session, Judge Hayes looked at Darnell with a different expression, one with a hint of reluctant respect. "Mr. Washington," she said, "you might want a proper suit for tomorrow." Darnell nodded. "I'll take care of it, Your Honor." But as he left the courtroom, he knew the truth. He couldn't afford a new suit. The only suit he owned had been moldy in his closet for over a decade and now hung loosely on him after years of physical labor. Victoria caught up to him in the hallway. "Mr. Washington," she called. He turned. This time, he looked at her not as a high-profile client, not as a billionaire on magazine covers, but as a human being clinging to her final thread of hope. She was taller than he expected, carrying the confident posture that money could buy. But in those sharp blue eyes, fear was something money couldn't hide. "Thank you," she said softly. I don't know why you're doing all this, but thank you." Darnell shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We've barely begun. And we need to talk seriously. I need to see every document related to this case, emails, notes, and schematics. If we're going to fight, I need to know everything." Victoria nodded. "Come to my place tonight. I keep everything there." "I can't," Darnell replied. "I have a work shift tonight." Victoria frowned. "A shift? But you're my lawyer." "And I'm also a janitor who needs to pay rent," Darnell said calmly. "The court isn't paying me to defend you, Miss Ashford. This is pro bono, free of charge, which means I need to work if I don't want to get fired." For the first time, Victoria truly felt the distance between her world and his. For her, paying $6,000 an hour for lawyers once felt normal. For this man, skipping a single shift could mean not having enough to pay rent. "I'll pay you," she said immediately. "No," Darnell answered firm. "If this were about money, I wouldn't be here today. I'm not doing this for prestige or compensation. I'm doing it because it is the right thing to do." He paused for a beat, then added gently, "But I'll come after my shift. Is midnight too late for you?" "Midnight is perfect," Victoria said, and somewhere deep inside, both of them understood. The real battle had only just begun. At midnight, Darnell parked the old Toyota in front of Victoria's mansion gate, still wearing his janitor uniform, which carried the lingering scent of cleaning chemicals from his 8-hour shift. He hadn't had time to go home and change, and the truth showed in every dried sweat mark on his shoulders. This time the gate guard had been told to expect him, but the way the man looked at Darnell's car and then at him, a black man in a maintenance uniform pulling up to a billionaire's estate, said everything. He didn't belong here. As he entered through the main door, another security officer escorted him, not to assist, but to make sure he didn't wander into restricted areas. Victoria was waiting in her office, still in the suit she'd worn to court, though she'd removed the jacket. She looked exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. "Coffee?" she asked. This time, Darnell nodded. He needed the caffeine to stay alert. She poured him a cup from an espresso machine that cost more than his monthly rent. The flavor was rich, smooth, and unfamiliar compared to the instant coffee he drank every morning. "All right." Darnell set the cup down. "Tell me the real story. Not the version you told your lawyers, not the version for the media. The truth." Victoria sat, her gaze fixed on her coffee cup as if it held the answers she'd been too afraid to confront. "I started quantum dynamics 12 years ago," she said, her voice softening as the memories pulled her backward. "Back then, I was just a recent MIT graduate obsessed with quantum computing. Everyone told me that stable quantum processing at room temperature was impossible. Qubits decay too quickly, they said. Only multi-million-dollar labs and extreme cooling systems could achieve anything close to that." Victoria's eyes lit up when she talked about her work, the first time Darnell saw the real woman beneath the armor of wealth and prestige. "But I had an idea. What if, instead of fighting the decay, we used it? What if the instability itself became part of the computation?" She gave a small laugh, not sure whether it was pride or bitterness. "They called me crazy. My professor told me I was wasting my time." "But you proved them wrong," Darnell said. Victoria nodded lightly. 6 years working in a matchbox-sized apartment, living on student loans, no funding, no lab, just me and my laptop. She stood, opened a safe hidden behind a painting, and pulled out a thin folder. "Here," she handed it to him. "All my original research notes, dated, notarized, everything. Proof that I developed this technology before Apex was even founded." Darnell opened the folder. Inside were hundreds of pages of equations, diagrams, handwritten notes. Raw, vivid, undeniable. "Why didn't your previous lawyers bring this up?" he asked. "They said it wasn't necessary," Victoria replied, exhaustion in her voice. "They said they had a better strategy." Darnell snapped the folder shut, jaw tightening. "Not introducing your most critical evidence isn't a strategy. It's sabotage." Victoria's face paled. "You mean—" "I mean your lawyers were paid to lose," Darnell said plainly. "The only question now is who paid them." They worked until 3 in the morning, going through every email, memo, and schematic. The deeper they dug, the clearer the pattern became. Crucial evidence ignored, key witnesses never called, objections made at the wrong times, a defense strategy almost deliberately suicidal. Victoria's former legal team wasn't incompetent. They were actively sabotaging her. "Is there anything you haven't told me?" Darnell asked. "Anything strange that's happened in the past few months?" Victoria hesitated. "There is one thing. Amanda Collins, my assistant. She copied files onto a USB drive." Darnell narrowed his eyes. "And you didn't question her?" "I trusted her. Amanda has been with me for 5 years. In cases like this," Darnell said slowly, "nothing is accidental. If she copied data, someone put her up to it." He looked at Victoria, his voice firm. "Tomorrow, no matter what I say or ask in court, you must not react. No surprise, no correcting me. Everything is already part of the plan." "Why?" "Because we're being watched," Darnell replied. "Maybe not right this second, but somewhere, somehow. And every plan we make, assume the enemy already knows." A chill ran down Victoria's spine. "You've been through this, haven't you?" Darnell was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly, 15 years ago, I took a case against Continental Energy Corporation. An engineer was whistleblowing about concealed safety violations. 3 workers died. I had enough evidence. But before the trial, the evidence vanished from my office." Victoria held her breath. Darnell continued. "They said I fabricated it. I forged documents to harm the company. I was suspended, then disbarred. It took me 4 years to prove my innocence. 4 years working odd jobs. 4 years watching my daughter grow up without her father fully present." His voice dropped lower. "And being a black man in that situation made everything harder. Every assumption worked against me." "They destroyed you," Victoria whispered. "They tried," Darnell corrected. "But they didn't take the one thing that mattered. My knowledge of the law. And that's something they will never take from you." When Darnell left at 4 a.m., the sky was still smudged dark like spilled ink. Victoria stood by the window, watching the glow of his car fade down the long road. It wasn't the first time she felt alone in this fight. But for the first time in months, in that darkness, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The next morning, Darnell walked into the courthouse wearing the suit he had bought from a thrift shop the night before. It wasn't new, it wasn't fancy, but it was clean, pressed, and presentable. $20 he could barely afford. But Judge Hayes had been right. Today, he needed to look like a real attorney. The courtroom was packed. The story of the janitor-turned-lawyer had spread across the city, and reporters squeezed into every available space. When Darnell entered, a few people even clapped, hesitant, uncertain, torn between cheering and mocking. He ignored all of it. He focused on the only thing that mattered: the truth. Rebecca Sterling was ready. A deep, wine-red power suit, squared shoulders, sharp eyes, the look of someone who believed the verdict was already hers. "The prosecution calls Dr. Raymond Foster," she announced. Dr. Foster stepped onto the witness stand, a man in his 50s, wire-rimmed glasses, the polished air of an academic. For nearly 20 minutes, Sterling let him construct a narrative in which he had developed the core algorithms of the quantum technology, and Victoria had stolen the credit. Quantum core, he claimed, was where the idea truly began. Darnell sat still, taking notes, expression unreadable. But inside, he was assembling the puzzle, the timelines, the claims, the inconsistencies, and none of it aligned. When his turn came, Darnell rose slowly. He carried a thin file, walking to the lectern with a calmness so steady it silenced the room. "Dr. Foster," he began, voice gentle but firm, "you testified that you developed quantum dynamics core algorithms from January through March of 2021, correct?" "That's correct." "Then please help me clarify something." Darnell lifted the first document. "This is your employment record with quantum dynamics. Would you read your start date for the court?" Foster glanced down, and his face drained of color. "April 21st, 2021. "I'm sorry," Darnell said softly. "I didn't catch that." "April 21st, he repeated louder, his voice trembling. Darnell turned to the jury. "So you could not have developed algorithms between January and March because you weren't employed yet." A ripple of shock spread across the courtroom. Darnell held up a second document. "And here are the server logs from Quantum Dynamics. They show the core algorithms were completed on March 15th, 2021, more than a month before you were hired. Would you like to explain how you contributed to a project that existed before you did?" Sterling leapt to her feet. "Objection. The prosecution did not receive this document." "Your Honor," Darnell said calmly, "these came directly from Quantum Dynamics' own system. If they failed to review the evidence available to them, that is not my fault." "Objection overruled," Judge Hayes said. "Proceed." Foster's hands began to shake. Darnell fixed his gaze on him. "Dr. Foster, one final question. Did you receive a payment of $300,000 from Apex Technologies 2 weeks before testifying here today?" Foster froze. That was... "Yes or no, doctor?" "I was compensated for my time and expertise." $300,000 for false testimony, Darnell said, voice sharp as steel. "Sounds more like a bribe than compensation." The room erupted. Darnell turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I move to enter evidence of this transaction and request that the witness be charged with perjury." Gasps, shouts, furious typing from reporters. The courtroom felt like it had detonated. And for the first time since the trial began, Darnell saw something he had been waiting for: fear in the eyes of Rebecca Sterling. They had never expected that a janitor would know how to tear their entire case apart. After the hearing, Darnell and Victoria stepped out of the courthouse into a forest of cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted questions from every direction, flash after flash bursting like lightning in a storm. Darnell lowered his head, placing a light hand on Victoria's back, skillfully guiding her through the chaotic crowd. Only when the taxi door shut, blocking out the noise, did Victoria finally breathe out. "How did you know about the payment to Foster?" she asked, still shaken. Darnell opened his old canvas briefcase. Not the leather kind, but the kind he'd bought from a thrift store. "I didn't know for sure," he said calmly. "But in cases like this, money always leaves a trail, I guessed." And the look in his eyes confirmed it. "You bluffed?" Victoria stared at him, genuinely surprised. "Almost," Darnell shrugged lightly. "But after I saw his reaction, I had someone double-check." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. "My daughter, Jasmine, she works in digital marketing, but her ability to dig up information is remarkable. Ever since I told her about this case, she's been investigating." His phone buzzed. A new message from Jasmine. "Dad, I found something big. Call me." Darnell looked up, turning to Victoria. "We need to meet my daughter, right now." An hour later, they sat in a small cafe in Jamaica, Queens, a space as foreign to Victoria as another planet. The cafe was cramped, plastic chairs squeaked, and the smell of cheap coffee mixed with old frying oil. But most importantly, it was private. No reporters, no cameras, no lawyers. Darnell had been coming here for years, one of the few places in the neighborhood that still felt like home. Jasmine Washington walked in. Darnell stood up abruptly, awkward, like a father unsure whether he still had the right to hug his daughter. Jasmine resolved it first. She stepped forward and hugged him. A quick, slightly hesitant hug, but a real one. She was 20, with long braided hair and warm brown skin like her father's, eyes that held the same quiet intensity. Jeans, a simple t-shirt, but carrying an expensive laptop and the confident walk of someone who knew her worth. "Dad," she said, then turned to Victoria. "And you must be Victoria Ashford. I'm Jasmine." They shook hands. Victoria couldn't help noticing the contrast. Her well-maintained hand, softened by luxury skincare, facing the practical work-built hands of Jasmine, a young woman who had built her own life from the ground up. Jasmine opened her laptop. "Okay, at first I wasn't sure what Dad wanted me to look for, so I started with Apex Technologies," she said. "On the surface, they're spotless, a venture-funded tech startup with a very tidy corporate history." She scrolled through a series of documents. "But when I dug into the ownership structure, things got strange. Apex is owned by a shell company in Delaware. That company is owned by another in the Cayman Islands. And that company," she paused, "is owned by Continental Energy Corporation." Darnell froze. "Continental Energy," he repeated. "You know them?" Jasmine asked. "Oh, yes," Darnell said quietly. "They're the company that destroyed my career 15 years ago." Jasmine stared at him, eyes wide. They had never truly spoken openly about it, about what happened, about who was behind it. "It was them all along," she whispered. Victoria leaned forward. "But why would an energy company care about my technology?" "At first, I didn't get it either," Jasmine said. "But then I read more about your tech." She turned the laptop so both Victoria and Darnell could see. "It's not just computing. If you can stabilize qubits at room temperature, the energy applications," she pulled up a scientific article, "are game-changing." She pointed to a highlighted section. "An MIT professor wrote that your technology could revolutionize energy storage and conversion. It could make fossil fuels obsolete within 20 years. 20 years, Victoria repeated, each word heavier than the last. "And Continental Energy makes $28 billion a year from coal, oil, and gas," Jasmine finished. "If your technology works as published, they don't just lose profit, they lose their entire empire." Darnell leaned back as if the pieces had finally clicked into place. "That's why they didn't try to buy you out or compete with you," he said slowly. "They needed to erase you, erase your technology, erase your credibility." "But more than that," Jasmine continued, "I kept digging. Continental Energy has ties to 4 other major energy conglomerates, 2 defense contractors, and... She paused again. 3 sitting members of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Jasmine pulled up more documents, images of campaign contributions, fundraising dinners, lavish trips. They've built a network, and when your technology came into view, they activated that entire network. What about the lawyers? Victoria asked, her voice cracking. How did they... I'm still tracing it, Jasmine said. But the managing partner at Mercer Thornton and Associates, he sits on the board of a subsidiary of Continental Energy. The information isn't easy to find, but it's there, if you know where to dig. Darnell stood and began pacing the cramped cafe, his mind moving as fast as Jasmine's words. So this isn't just a lawsuit, he said. This is a coordinated campaign to clear the path for a trillion-dollar industry. And they won't stop, Victoria said, fear now clearly visible in her eyes. If they did this to you 15 years ago, if they can manipulate things to this extent... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. All 3 of them understood. Jasmine's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face drained. It's my old boss. He says I don't need to come back to the office. My belongings will be mailed to me. They fired you? Victoria asked. On paper, it's position eliminated, Jasmine said bitterly. But the timing says everything. Darnell placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. I'm sorry, Jasmine. I never wanted to pull you into this. Jasmine looked up, her eyes steadier than before. You didn't pull me into anything. I chose this. And now that I'm in, I'm helping you fight. For the first time in years, Darnell didn't see Jasmine as the child who had lost her mother or the grown woman he had missed for too many years. He saw something else, an ally, a partner. All right, he said, exhaling as if sealing a decision. Then we do this together. In the days that followed, the threats were no longer a vague feeling. They became clear signs, sharp and dangerous enough to make Darnell's stomach tighten every time he thought about them. His small apartment in Jamaica, Queens, was broken into. Nothing was stolen. There was nothing of value to take, but everything was torn apart. The closet yanked open, drawers dumped onto the floor, the mattress slashed with a long, deep cut. As if someone wanted to send a message. We know where you live. Jasmine's laptop was hacked. Thankfully, she had backed up all her data to an encrypted cloud server. But the fact that someone had intentionally breached her device and done it blatantly sent a chill down her spine. Then, one night, as Victoria left the office late, a black SUV ran a red light and sped straight toward her car. Her driver swerved in time. The car spun, crashing into a lamppost to avoid a head-on collision. Victoria escaped with only scrapes and bruises, but the message was carved in stone. She was a target. During an emergency meeting at Victoria's mansion the next morning, she said clearly, "You need to get out of your apartment, Darnell. Jasmine, you both need to move here, where I have real security." "We can't just live in your home like that," Darnell began, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't want to owe you anything else." "This isn't a favor," Victoria cut in firmly. "This is a defensive strategy. They're attacking us individually. If we stay together, with professional security, we're safer." Jasmine placed a hand on her father's arm. "She's right, Dad. How am I supposed to work if I keep worrying someone will break in every night?" Reluctantly, Darnell agreed. That afternoon, they moved into the guest house on Victoria's estate, a smaller, separate building, but still bigger than anywhere Darnell had ever lived in his life. While Jasmine excitedly explored the rooms, Darnell remained in the living room, back straight but hands unconsciously tightening. The high ceilings, designer furniture, expensive paintings on the walls, all of it made him feel like an ink blot on a perfect canvas. He stared out through the glass doors into the meticulously trimmed garden. It was hard to believe that just 48 hours earlier, he'd been in an apartment barely big enough for one person to turn around in. Victoria entered the room and stopped beside him. "You're uncomfortable," she observed without needing to ask. "I've lived 15 years in a small apartment," Darnell said in a low voice, "and this isn't my world." Victoria stood beside Darnell for a long moment, as if giving him time to breathe in this unfamiliar space. Then she spoke gently. "Maybe it should be your world. You have talent, strength, Mr. Washington. You could have been in a place like this, or far better, if they hadn't taken everything from you." Darnell turned toward her, and for the first time since they met in the courtroom, he truly looked at Victoria. Not as a client, not as a billionaire, but as a woman fighting for justice alongside him. Her blue eyes, though tired, gleamed with something rare. Genuine respect. "I don't need any of this," Darnell replied, his voice firm. "I never did. I want justice. I want to help people who have no voice. And after all these years, I finally have a chance to do that again." "By helping me," Victoria said. "By fighting those who believe money and power place them above the law," Darnell corrected. They stood silently in the wide living room, the afternoon sunlight filtering softly through the large glass wall. The distance between their worlds, a janitor who used to be a lawyer and a billionaire tech founder, was still there. But in that moment, it didn't feel as impossible as before. Something had shifted, not because of what they said, but because they were standing side by side, facing a common enemy. And in that silence, they knew. The real battle had only just begun. The next major breakthrough came from a place no one could have imagined. At 2 a.m, Amanda Collins, Victoria's longtime COO, appeared at the gate, her face pale, clothes disheveled, hair blown out as if she had been out in the wind all night. Security immediately informed Victoria, and she hurried to wake Darnell. They met Amanda in a small room separate from the main house, a safety measure in case this was a trap. Amanda nearly collapsed when she saw Victoria. Her makeup was smeared with tears, her hands trembling violently. "I'm sorry," she blurted out at once. "I'm so sorry." "For what?" Victoria asked, her voice sharp as steel. Amanda took a deep breath. "For everything. For copying the files. For passing information to them. For staying silent when I knew what they were doing to you." "Who is they?" Darnell asked. "Thomas Blackwell," Amanda replied, her voice hoarse. "The CEO of Apex Technologies. He came to see me 6 months ago. He knew about my mistake." "What mistake?" Victoria asked. Amanda looked down at her hands, too ashamed to lift her head. 10 years ago, before I worked for you, I worked at another company. I embezzled $50,000. Not a lot, but still a crime. I paid the money back, and the company didn't call the police. I thought it was over." "But Blackwell found out," Darnell said. Amanda nodded, tears spilling again. "He had documents, emails, bank statements, everything. He told me that if I didn't help him, he'd turn me in. I would go to prison." "So you chose to help him," Victoria said, her tone flat. "I copied the data. I told him your strategies. Amanda choked up. "I even planted false information in some files to make it look like you accessed Apex research." "Fabricated evidence," Darnell said darkly. "Exactly what they once did to me." "But why come here now?" Victoria asked, her gaze icy but with a trace of pity. Amanda pulled out a phone, not her own, but a high-end model, completely out of place in her pocket. Darnell recognized it immediately. This wasn't Amanda's personal phone. "Today," Amanda said, her hands shaking, "I accidentally overheard Blackwell on the phone. He told someone about a permanent solution if the legal route failed." She swallowed hard. "They were talking about killing you, Victoria." The room suddenly felt freezing. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I betrayed you," Amanda continued, voice breaking. But I can't live with this. Not with murder. She handed the phone to Darnell. This is Blackwell's phone. I took it from his office. It has everything, messages, emails, and call recordings, the whole conspiracy. Darnell took the phone, feeling as if he were holding a grenade with the pin pulled. This could end the case, or end us, Jasmine said from the doorway. She had arrived without anyone noticing. If they realize she took it, they will know. Blackwell will search for the phone by morning, if not sooner, Amanda whispered. He'll notice it's gone. That's why I came straight here. Victoria stared at Amanda for a long moment. This woman had been by her side for 5 years, through stressful meetings, fundraising rounds, and sleepless nights, and now she was the one who had stabbed her in the back. But in those tear-filled eyes in front of her, Victoria saw not just fear. She saw remorse, real and deep. You risked your own safety to come here, Victoria said, her voice softening for the first time. I owe you more than that, Amanda replied, trembling. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You trusted me, and I betrayed that. This is the least I can do. Darnell didn't hesitate. We need to copy every piece of data on this phone immediately. Jasmine, can you do it? Give me 15 minutes, Jasmine said, already opening her laptop. While Jasmine worked, Darnell asked Amanda, You know they'll come looking for you, right? Amanda nodded. I know. You need to disappear, at least until the case is over. I have a sister in Canada, Amanda said. I can go there. Go now. Don't go home. Don't pack. Go straight there. 20 minutes later, all the data had been safely backed up onto Jasmine's encrypted server. In the darkness, Amanda left in a taxi, never looking back. Darnell watched the car until its tail lights vanished, wondering whether they were right to trust her, and whether she would survive the night. Victoria stood beside him, her voice soft but steady. She truly is sorry. Sorry doesn't erase the damage, Darnell said bluntly. No, Victoria agreed, but courage can redeem it. She knew they would retaliate and still came here. Darnell drew a long breath, his jaw tightening with iron determination. Now we have to use what she gave us, and we need to move fast, because once they realize we have this evidence... He looked down at the phone in his hand, the live proof of a massive conspiracy. They'll come at us with everything they have. They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, as Darnell, Jasmine, and Victoria were reviewing every piece of evidence inside Thomas Blackwell's phone, the estate's security alarms abruptly screamed. Breach at the main gate, the security director reported through the intercom system. Multiple individuals, armed. Victoria shot to her feet, locked down the entire property, and called the police. But as the security screens switched angles, the truth became unmistakable. 6 men in tactical uniforms, fully equipped, moving through the estate with the precision of people who had clearly received military training. They're not police, Darnell said, his voice dropping. Mercenaries, said Henderson, the head of security, ex-military or private contractors. They know exactly what they're doing. We have to get out of here, Jasmine panicked, but the cameras showed 2 more vehicles blocking the back exit. No escape route left. Henderson, formerly NYPD, now head of Victoria's security, made a decision immediately. Safe room, move, now. He led them across the house, down to the basement, unlocking a steel door hidden behind a wine cabinet. Inside was a compact panic room, reinforced concrete walls, surveillance monitors, and a direct hard line to 911. You'll be safe in here. This door can withstand explosives, Henderson said. My team and I will hold them off as long as we can. Victoria said earliest arrival is 15 minutes, Victoria reported after checking with the police. We only need to survive 15, Henderson replied. The door shut behind them with a cold, metallic clack. Inside the panic room, the 3 stared at the surveillance screens. The mercenaries moved like shadows, silent, methodical, each step calculated. Henderson and the 4 guards under him were already in defensive positions. "They're going to die," Jasmine whispered, her hands trembling. "Those men are outgunned and outnumbered." "Henderson knows how to fight," Victoria said, trying to sound steady, but her voice shook. Then the gunfight began. On the monitors, the battle unfolded like a nightmare stripped of sound. Henderson and his team fought fiercely, using every corridor and blind spot. But the intruders were professionals, moving with flawless formation. One guard fell, one mercenary went down, but the attackers kept advancing. "They're heading for the basement," Darnell said. "They know we're here." "How do they—" Victoria stopped mid-sentence, her face draining of color. "Amanda," Jasmine said quickly. "She must have told them about the safe room, or they had the floor plans from day one. Either way, they know." Darnell looked around the room. One door, no windows, no backup exit, no weapons. They were trapped inside a metal coffin, waiting to be opened. On screen, a mercenary placed a device on the basement door. "They're planting explosives," Jasmine said, terror rising in her voice. Darnell dialed 911. "We're under attack at 247 Hudson Yards. Multiple armed assailants with explosives. We need immediate support." "The nearest unit is 3 minutes out," the operator said. "Stay inside." 3 minutes. But the explosives would blow in less than 1. Victoria squeezed Darnell's hand. "If this is how it ends—" "It isn't," he cut her off. "We've come too far. We don't end like this." Just as the device began to blink, seconds from detonation, an unexpected image flashed onto the monitors. Police vehicles. Then more police vehicles. Then SWAT armored trucks, not 1 or 2, but nearly an entire strike force pouring into the estate. The mercenaries saw it too. They halted, exchanged hand signals, then retreated, disappearing as quickly as they arrived, leaving the explosive behind, still untriggered. "They're running!" Jasmine almost screamed in disbelief. 10 minutes later, SWAT secured the property, disarmed the device, and cleared every structure. When the panic room door finally opened, Darnell, Victoria, and Jasmine stepped out, faces pale, but alive. A tall man in an FBI jacket was waiting, badge partially visible. "Agent Michael Torres." "Miss Ashford, Mr. Washington, I'm glad you're safe." Victoria immediately asked, "How did you get here so fast?" "We've been monitoring Thomas Blackwell and his associates for weeks," Torres said. "When a taxi driver reported transporting a woman matching Amanda Collins's description toward the Canadian border, we knew something major had happened. We deployed a team immediately." "Is she safe?" Victoria asked softly. "Amanda? She's under protective custody in Canada," Torres said, "and she's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity." Darnell exhaled, years of weight releasing from his chest. "So we have enough to bring them down?" "More than enough," Torres replied, a thin, controlled smile forming. "We arrested Thomas Blackwell, 3 Continental Energy executives, and 6 other accomplices within the last hour. With the data from his phone, Collins's testimony, and this attack—" He straightened, his voice firm. "They're going to prison for a very, very long time." The next morning, when Darnell stepped into the courtroom, the atmosphere had completely changed. There were no longer curious stares treating him like a novelty. What replaced them was a quiet respect. From the reporters, even the prosecution attorneys. They looked drained, as though they had just survived a battle they knew they could never win. Judge William Carter, assigned after Judge Hayes recused herself due to a conflict of interest, struck his gavel to open the session. "I am aware there were significant developments overnight," he said. Prosecutor Rebecca Sterling rose, her shoulders nearly collapsed. "Your Honor, in light of the new arrests and the evidence presented this morning, the prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against Miss Ashford." The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Darnell remained seated, watching Sterling with a strange sense of sympathy. She, too, had been a pawn in a game far larger than she could have comprehended. "The motion is granted," Judge Carter declared. "Miss Ashford, you are free." He paused, eyes lingering on Darnell. "And Mr. Washington, this court has never witnessed such a remarkable act in pursuit of justice. You are deserving of every recognition that will follow." As they walked out of the courtroom, Victoria turned to Darnell, tears shimmering in her eyes. "We did it. We actually won." "You won," Darnell said gently. "You never gave up, not even when everything looked hopeless." Jasmine wrapped her arms around both of them, breaking the solemnity. "No, we won. As a team." 2 months later, Darnell stood outside a building on Fifth Avenue, looking up at the freshly mounted sign, "Washington and Washington Law, Anti-Discrimination and Civil Rights." Jasmine stood beside him, holding a brand-new law textbook. After everything she had witnessed, she had enrolled in law school, a decision born directly from the trial that changed their lives. "Do you think we can really run this place?" Jasmine asked. "We can," Darnell said. "We already have our first 3 clients, all people who were turned away because they couldn't afford an attorney." Jasmine smiled. "Thanks to the Ashford Legal Justice Fund." Victoria had not only founded the fund with an initial $15 million contribution, but she had rallied support from tech CEOs across the industry who had followed the trial closely. The fund would sponsor civil rights cases across America. As they entered the still-empty office, Darnell heard the sound of heels behind him. Victoria stood at the door, holding a bottle of champagne. "I thought we should celebrate a little," she said, her warm smile filling the bare room. Jasmine understood immediately. "I'll go look for some glasses. It might take a while." Then she slipped away, leaving Darnell and Victoria alone in the quiet office. They stood side by side in the unfinished room, wrapped in the peace that follows a storm. "I never properly thanked you," Victoria said softly, "for standing up that day, for believing in me when everyone else turned their backs." "There's nothing to thank," Darnell replied. "You gave me something I thought I had lost forever. A purpose." Over the past 2 months, through investigations, press conferences, and work for the foundation, something had shifted between them. It began as respect, then friendship. And now, standing here in the gentle afternoon light streaming through the windows, it had become something deeper. "Darnell," she said, calling him by his first name for the very first time. "I know we come from 2 different worlds. I know people will talk, but I've realized the only thing that truly matters." "What is it?" he asked quietly. "That the world doesn't matter. People's opinions don't matter. What matters is finding someone who understands you, stands beside you, and makes you a better version of yourself." She paused, then continued in a whisper. "And I found that person." Darnell's heart stalled. Since Michelle died 15 years ago, he had never once allowed himself to love again. He buried the grief, buried the hope, buried the idea that he was worthy of another chance. But Victoria, who had seen past the janitor's uniform, past the scars, past all the barriers the world had placed before a black man trying to reclaim his life, had broken through every wall. "I live a completely different life," Darnell said softly. "I have nothing but integrity," Victoria interrupted gently, "and courage, and kindness, and a heart that knows how to fight for what's right." She touched his hand. "I had money and success. What I didn't have was someone who saw me as a human being." Darnell looked down at their hands, one soft, one calloused, her pale fingers interlaced with his dark, weathered ones, different, yet fitting together with impossible ease. "Michelle was the love of my youth," he said. "I thought that part of my life was over." "But?" Victoria asked, her voice nearly a breath. "But maybe we are given more than one chance," he said, "if we're brave enough to take it." They stood there in a silence so gentle it felt like the world had paused outside. Then Darnell leaned in, slow, careful, tender. The kiss was a promise from two people who had been broken, had lost so much yet still found the courage to hope again. Jasmine's voice suddenly echoed from the back room. "I can't find any glasses. We might have to buy some." Darnell and Victoria burst into laughter, the private moment dissolving into warm ease. "Come on," Victoria said, taking Darnell's hand. "Let's show your daughter her new office, and maybe tonight the three of us can go out to dinner." "I'd like that," Darnell said. Before stepping out, he paused at the door, looking once more at the sign. Washington and Washington Law. A new beginning, a second chance. No, he corrected himself silently, a second life. Darnell Washington's story reminds us that it is never too late to begin again, that justice isn't measured by wealth or status, but by courage and the unshakable will to fight back, that heroes come in many forms, sometimes wearing cleaning gloves instead of a tailored suit. He shows us that failure is not the end, that betrayal can be overcome, and that even after the deepest losses, love can still find its way back. Most importantly, Darnell proves that every one of us has the power to stand up, to speak out, and to fight for what is right, no matter who tries to silence us. If you were in Darnell's place, what would you choose? A stable corporate job with a high salary, or starting a new path to defend those who have no voice? Share your answer below. And if this story of perseverance and justice moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next extraordinary stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person standing up for what's right can change the world. Thank you for watching I Will Defend Her. And remember, justice doesn't always wear an expensive suit, and love can bloom in the most unexpected places. Never give up hope, never stop fighting, and never underestimate the power of one good person with the courage to stand tall.